We are honored to welcome Juana May Hal Dixon, traditional legislator and councilwoman from the Palma Band of Mission Indians, to open our consultation today with an invocation. Traditional legislator and councilwoman Juana May Hal Dixon, please begin when you are ready.
Hello, everyone. Me, you. That's like a short version of hey, hi. I'm so glad to be here, part of your world, and talk to our partners on the federal side as well as all our tribal folks. Yesterday was a big day for us in the beginning of a very straightforward conversation. So I'm going to ask Creator Chulupobio, come be with us. Ata, Tawa, all of you, come on, sit. Let us speak. Let us listen to the words we have to share. Some of us will speak from that strong sense of purpose. This is good. Some of us will speak from the things they have learned and shared through time from those who have done this work as boots on the ground, those who deal with our people who have been harmed. We put all of you in a blessing way and a sacred road you walk, where we know that in our world, when we do this work, Creator knows that it's because of Creator's will and our strength, our breath we give to lay hands, to hold, to protect, to stand our ground. We do it together. I ask each of you to think about what you will say and what you need most, and let that be heard. Let it be recorded. Let it be a part of who we are. I celebrate life with Creator's will. From the four directions we come. We also know no shul no pulie, that from that heart, that good-hearted side, no shul. To live in a world where your language has no words like hate, no words like that are meant to harm. And love is another word that we don't have. So no shul is that heart. From the heart I speak, which is all the compassion, everything we hold. Sometimes when I listen to you speak, you take my breath away. It's powerful. Your gifts are that. From the federal side to the tribal side, we will come together in a good way. Chulupuyo, ataong puwag sumishi lava kuyo. We love Creator. This we bestow upon ourselves with no shul no puli create uyot. Gishinik that in this house we sit together and speak. Loving them. This is a good thing. Jonamish, all my relations. That's an Indian amen. Oh, thank you.
Kunda Woha, thank you for traditional legislator and councilwoman Juana Mayhow for opening our session. We thank you for sharing those words with us and sharing those intentions and opening us up in a good way. Next, we will have Hunter Genia. Hunter is Ananishbe and Ojibwe and Ottawa, who will share with us a song today. Hunter, please begin when you are ready.
Ani Wujo, Yusa Ninin Addition Cause, Wabajan Shido Dem, Mount Pleasant, Michigan, that did the Saginaw, Swan Creek, Black River Band, Ojibwe, Minwa, Grand River Band, Odawa, Anishinaabe, Dao, Kachimagwachka, Bijiek, Mompi, Nongo. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. Thank you to the Office of Victims of Crime for asking me to help us open up in a good way. And I really want to give a special acknowledgement to all of those in Indian country that are giving voice to our people that need someone to lean on and carry forward their pain and grief. And as I sing in the song, my hope and wish is that those on the federal end listen with an open heart and take positive action on behalf of our people in Indian country. I hope.
Kundawaha, Hunter. Thank you. Catherine, we are now ready to begin the consultation.
Thank you, Jamie, and thank you so much, Juana and Hunter, for opening our consultation today with wisdom and with heart. I would like to introduce Jessica E. Hart, Director of the Office for Victims of Crime at the U.S. Department of Justice, where she oversees programs and services that help victims in the aftermath of crime as they rebuild their lives. Ms. Hart was appointed to this position by President Donald J. Trump and officially sworn into office on March 31st, 2020. As the director for the Office of Victims of Crime, She oversees the administration of nearly $9 billion of grants and other projects that are vital to victims of human trafficking, mass violence, elder abuse, sexual assault, domestic violence, and child abuse across the country and in tribal communities. Director Hart, we're ready for you.
Thanks, Catherine. Welcome everyone to the 2020 Office of Victims of Crime Consultation on the Tribal Victims Set-Aside Program for Fiscal Year 2021. I want to also thank Juana and Hunter for starting us off right today in a really good way and setting a good intention for today's consultation. I know a lot of us would like to have met in person, but I'm so grateful that at least we got to get together yesterday and today and still carry on these important conversations even during this time. As the director of the Office for Victims of Crime, it's my honor to be with you today and to host this government-to-government setting to talk about the future of the Office for Victims of Crime funding. Attorney General Barr and Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General Katie Sullivan, who many of you heard from at the beginning of our tribal consultation yesterday, and the Department of Justice have a long-standing commitment to improve services for victims of crime in American Indian and Alaska Native communities. General Barr and Katie, PDAG Katie Sullivan, have both traveled into Indian country numerous times. Attorney General Barr just recently announced in September, when visiting Cherokee Nation, about $300 million in Department of Justice funding to improve public safety, serve victims of crime, and support youth programs in tribal communities. During my time at the Department of Justice, I've spent time with tribal leaders to learn how the federal government can best support your communities as you work to reduce violence and really serve victims in your communities. The Office for Victims of Crime has consistently taken action on the testimony and comments that we've received during these consultations and listening sessions. For example, our Tribal Victim Services Set-Aside Formula grant that we did for the first time this year actually came out of some of these consultations and tribal listening sessions. Also, another thing that came out of those was this last June, I created the Tribal Grants Division. And this division is really solely dedicated to tribal issues and staff that's completely dedicated to these issues as well. The salaries of these staff in the OVC Tribal Division are paid from the same management and administration operating fund that pays for all of the federal salaries at OJP. So I want to let you know that those staff in the Tribal Division, no tribal set-aside funds are used for the OV staff salaries or other administrative costs. And so we're excited to launch this new division that's really dedicated to focusing on our tribal funding. We've also heard from tribal leaders and stakeholders that these regular consultations and listening sessions are really integral to the trust relationship between the federal government and tribal governments. And I think we really learn from each other, and we as federal employees can really help draft put our funding together in a better way for you using these consultations and listening to you. So we're so thankful that you came here today and yesterday, and we're really excited to hear. We had some great ideas come out of yesterday. I'm excited to hear some more ideas today that we can really work hand in hand together. As many of you guys know, in 2020, or this year, the Office of Victims of Crime implemented an interim formula for distributing tribal set-aside funds. Largely, this was, as I said, in response to past tribal consultations and listening sessions, where tribal leaders expressed a strong preference that the tribal set-aside money from the CVF would be distributed through formula rather than a competitive program. So our consultation framing paper details really that history of the tribal set-aside. So I don't want to get into too many specifics, but I do want to talk about this year's funding. So this year, the tribal set-aside was authorized at 3% of the Crime Victims Fund, and that was for a total of approximately $132 million. We don't yet have the budget for fiscal year 2021 yet. So for fiscal year 2020, Under this non-competitive formula program, federally recognized Indian tribes, tribal designees, and tribal consortia consisting of 2 or more federally recognized Indian tribes were eligible to apply for that set-aside funding. We made 133 tribal set-aside formula awards, which totaled approximately $113 million, and provided funds and victim services to over 200 tribes. This represents every dollar and every eligible tribe or tribal designee that requested money from the set aside. One thing I think is important to remember is the tribal set aside is not a statutory formula program, but is actually a discretionary program, but we're using a formula method to distribute the funds. So Congress did not create a formula program when it authorized those set-aside funds. And therefore, OVC, even though we've chosen to administer it non-competitively in a formula way, we still are required to adhere to federal statutes that govern discretionary grant-making authority. And so some of those federal statutes, they really detail how we must administer discretionary programs, including oversight of budget, collecting certifications by the grantees that require lobbying, and other specifics. And so I know this is always a question of why does OVC require a lot of these, budgetary requirements? And that's really something that we're required to do by law. However, we'd really like to work with you guys in streamlining the oversight and administration of the set-aside grants as much as we can within that legal setting. And so I think, that's why today is so important, that we can talk, and we would love to at OVC hear about ways that you think we could streamline that process that would still kind of fit inside that federal statute. But we definitely would like to streamline it as much as we can to better support you. Another example of a way that we've tried to streamline the process for this coming year, fiscal year 2021, we're going to not require an abstract or written project narrative with your application. So that's something new, but instead we're going to give you the option of either completing a checklist describing your project activities or holding a meeting with the tribal division staff to talk through your project plans so they can then put them on paper. And so that's really a decision up to the applicant, which method they would like to do. But we think that will be a lot simpler and a lot more streamlined and much easier for everyone to apply. We've also increased resources to our Tribal Financial Management Center. This is one of our technical assistance providers who's dedicated to helping tribes and grantees work on their budget clearances and the other administrative issues that you really need support on to try to get your access to your funds. So I hope all of you will take advantage of that. And that's another thing that we'd like to look at. We heard some information yesterday, but I'd love to hear more about how you think the technical assistance is working or in other cases is not working, and maybe ways that we could really improve upon that. That is a resource that we've created for you, and we'd love to hear if you think that that's useful or if you don't, because we want to make sure that the funds are getting used in the best way possible. Another, also in response to testimony and comments we've received at some of the consultation and listening sessions, in 2020, OVC made the project period for Tribal Victim Services Set-Aside Formula Program up to 60 months. So that's potentially 2 years longer than most of our other OVC grants. And that's just adding more flexibility. You can still do 12 months if you like, but you have up to 60 months. So that's something that we're hoping gives everyone a lot more flexibility. For 2021, we're proposing to retain a lot of the same features we did in last year's set-aside formula program. So still keeping it a formula, non-competitive distribution of those set-aside funds based on that population-driven formula. And we'd like to keep the two-phase process that allows us to calculate the grant awards based on the number of tribes that intend to apply, and then also for you all to self-determine the project period of 12 to 60 months and to self-certify the tribal population numbers based on the population the tribes intend to serve under the set-aside program. So those are some of the things that we think worked really well this year that we'd like to continue. But again, we would love to hear more from you today. Criticisms, praises. We'd just love to hear how you think that worked and how we can improve upon it. Finally, and most importantly, we want to make sure everyone here knows that you're eligible, all federally recognized tribes are eligible to apply for fiscal year 2021 set-aside formula funding, regardless of when they last received set-aside funds. So if you didn't apply last year, you can still apply this year, or if you did apply last year, you can still apply this year. So I'd really encourage you all to apply for our set-aside funds this year. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Catherine. Like I said, we're here with open ears today and ready to hear suggestions. And I think this is a great setting for us to work together to really try to best use OBC's funds. And I'm excited to hear from everyone. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Director Hart. I'm Catherine Dirk-Schmidt from the Office for Victims of Crime Tribal Division. And my co-moderator today is Marcia Good, the Executive Director of the Presidential Task Force on Missing and Murdered American Indians and Alaska Natives at the Department of Justice. I am grateful for her wisdom and support. Our first speaker today will be Juana Mahel Dixon. Juana, you have the testimony floor.
I think I did it. It's quite extraordinary to be able to do this. As Dr. Juana Mahel Dixon, from I am a traditional legislative councilwoman from PAUMA, PAUMA, and it's something I was kind of like thrown into as a very young woman. I was 19 at the time, not knowing that it would bring me to this point with you. And as also this work I do, I want to acknowledge all the leadership in the room who have come, and all of you who are not, but are by tradition and custom leaders in your world. I acknowledge you, especially those who are the practitioners. I want to speak to you on a couple things, and gosh, it's one thing to listen to everybody speak yesterday and what was on our minds coming to this gathering and looking at your framing questions, and I appreciate that. And you changed your station some. I don't know what you did with your framing questions; they were there, but I wanted to tell you that in this journey that we do as working with you, coming to understand the fight we had just getting there with Congress, and we felt that we were being set up to fail. And in some ways, you've worked forward. Katie, you've done an extraordinary amount of work stepping into this position, and Jessica as well, and many of the others that are there, and those before you. When we talked about this with the others through the years, coming to this, where we attended the OEC gatherings every other year, which we miss dearly, it was a way to come together, and I hope that comes back. But in our journey that we've had with you, we've had a tough lesson of being those who applied for the grants, going to Alaska to meet with Consultation with you and talk to the Alaskan folks and get them to understand what was being asked of them, and their extraordinary testimonies that they gave, and that they gave us from the lower 48 a moment to speak, and good old Indian ways, it says, and why are these folks up here from the lower 48? Don't they know this is Alaska? I loved it. It's the way we do things in Indian country. Welcome, you're over here at the plains. Aren't you from the coast? It's just part of our tribal stuff. But once we realize we are in this journey together and protecting one another across all these planes of geography is important. Katie, in your work that you've done, coming forward and committing to acknowledging when we were up in Wisconsin how a breach of trust was happening, and how the trust responsibilities of the federal government, and you representing our president in this gathering and having us as sovereigns to speak to the sovereigns of America, the president and its group, and you're that representative, you carry our voice. Working at the formula, you've had some good feedback on that. You've worked with subject matter experts, and I want us to continue because we're so close to getting this right. There's still work to be done, and integrating victim services. When you think about that, Indian country is all of that in Alaska. We look at wanting to go forward and succinctly with your help, Katie and Jessica and the gang that's in the Fed side, that we need your help to make certain your support really make certain that all that hard work we did to get Savannah's Act passed and look at having an expectation as a government to sovereign to meet, to have a consultation in the new administration, to have that consultation in the new year on a government to government basis. Also on the Not Invisible Act. These are things that are going forward. When they're going forward, it's one thing what you say, getting there. Now that it's happened, going forward, we have to meet. We have to talk. Because we have learned from our subject matter experts and our people who do this work and the work we do as leadership that we have to have that conversation. So I urge you as our representatives to encourage with our career people that are there. I urge you to follow through in terms of help setting up this consultation, and we know flexibility and stuff is important, but on this stuff, no, because it's going to hit on the ground. They're doing appropriations now. When I look at what's going on with state and local law and enforcement activities, tribes have this relationship. It's why we had these gatherings with OVC, so that what was happening in VAWA in terms of the third offender offense and that it trips federal has to be resolved. When we look at what is CTAS and VOCA in the money, that has to be worked out. As you know, when we're trying to do services, we've come to you because America's government had a law passed in the 50s that got modified in the 60s, and then tried to make it rule in a 280 world that is not our world. As a tribal sovereign, on my sovereign land, our laws are sovereign amongst our sovereign citizens. And those who come into my country, where I'm at, agreed to be governed by our laws, just as is expected of America and the US. As you come into my country and you're representing whoever you're representing, I would expect that you would respect those laws as you would with France or Mexico. Knowing that when you do the work we do, working with Office of Victims Services, when we include things around domestic violence, dating violence, and other services, and sexual assault, and other services that is a tribal member, we have full faith and credit relationships with other villages where our members might have married and moved to. They're still under our protection if we have this understanding with another sovereign. How that doesn't get transferred sometimes with our federal partners can be very dangerously re-victimizing not only the victim, but everyone else connected to it. To realize that we had to search for a way to look at the way we look at, I guess you would say, the relationships. If there are a way to realize that Mexico is just below us, we're in the 100-mile marker of the international line, which means above my village where I am, it ends up there. It ends up there. I'm here, it's up there, which means I'm like at the 50, 60-mile marker, maybe 70 marker, and then it goes up another. And then when you look at the coast, the marker there that comes in, we have 27 military installations here. And the fact that we have cartels here, the level of trafficking that's occurring is unprecedented in this corridor of the world. But what's crazy about this corridor of the world, it hooks right up to Minneapolis, Minnesota, that area up into Wisconsin. It's like this vein of trafficking that's going on. And our children, our young folks are being cyber stalked, especially now under COVID. It's the measure of what we consider victim services is changing as we go. And then you go to what we are, where we have telework stuff, the expectation that the bandwidth of where we're at to do services that COVID has taken away, the flexibility to move inside of our societies. We have 144 square miles. And when we respond to a victim, it's not just the telework. We keep a very strong team and keep them pristine and protected as much as we can. But if we have to go into a situation with a victim, what is currently going on, there was no expectation for that expense. There was no expectation to revise this. There's no way to get a no cost extension to include that. And or can we modify what is services within your perspective that you gave initially requires a needs assessment that has changed radically because of what's going on. Are you thinking of these things? I will think about them with you, and I will persuade you to keep moving forward as we do this progressive thinking, because we did not expect this in funding, in services. You know, can you move away that paper that's on the screen? I think it's blocking some of the things that are being said. I'm not sure. But I don't need to look at your words no more. Uh, they would rather see what's going on with our conversation. I don't blame them. As a tribal leader and doing this work and as a practitioner, you must understand that we have done this without you. And now we're doing it with you. Let us improve upon it. Let us take what your strengths were to move forward in the next administration of whatever that becomes. When I think about what OEC, I don't think, Katie, it was the intent under OVC to be so built into such a box that the tribes who are receiving funding, many are going to fail in your eyes because of what has hit our world. And getting the money out to the recipients of these awards, they got their letters. But a third of all the recipients for more than 6 months did not receive their funding. And if you do no cost extension, which logically, if it started 6 months ago or a year ago, that's funding that now has to be done in 2 years of 3-year funding that can be almost impossible to do. In some cases, it will be. And the last thing you want to give the politicians is this tool of not all connecting all the dots of what impacted that. There was a learning curve for everyone, but the tribe should not have to pay the price for that. And I will fight that. You know this about me. I will stand up and fight that no cost extension. It's unreasonable. You and I both know this. In terms of working out issues, in terms of concerns with the reporting process, we were required at our OVC gatherings that we had to meet with our tribal and state counterparts on victim services and kinds of funding. And we learn from them. My state alone, you have heard me say this to you. $264 million came to California based on the number of Indians. Yes, we have over 600,000 Indians in California, of which half is federally based on lands. The other are throughout the rural areas and urban areas. But what they said, 5 people, whoops, hold on, 5 people applied, of which 2 were passed through. The third one was a small, like $150,000 grant. The other ones were designees, and who actually did it on behalf of the tribe, but we're not tribal. And of that 264 million that came, and that 1% administration thing, only, I guess maybe, I don't know, 2 million came used. So when we asked them, what did you have to give the money back? Because it was grieving us, that this happened. And it was a great conversation at that gathering, but they said no. I said, well, what did you do with the money? They said, we spent it on behalf of you. And so when you go to some of those gatherings, my relatives, you see all that swag that's out there that's coming from them. It was created with our funding, to educate us on these crimes and these victim services. It's a good thing that they did that, but it makes no sense that it was done with the money that was set aside to work within our state partners. What we had to learn, which is circling back to what I started, is that sovereign tribes' greatest fear, because there is such a misunderstanding of public law 280 in a 280 state. There's no such thing as a 280 tribe. That it will grandfather state law into the tribe on its sovereign land if they get money from the state. So there's this invisible barrier that they don't even look at the money. The tribes just say, no, we don't want to lose more of our sovereignty. And that often is lost inside of this as we do this services for our victims, as we provide what they need. Anything to educate and prevent this victimization that's going on. It does not allow us to do preventive services. It allows us to educate. And that's a crazy part when you talk about Office of Victims Services. It's almost like an oxymoron in some ways. But the state and local enforcement activities also are about prevention and prosecution programs. When we finally get to a place where we know, the prosecutors are going to be able to prosecute because you have everything lined up, it's when, kind of like how it begins to drift away from the federal assistance. We have a tribal advisory board. If they were part of OVC, it would help you understand that. It'd help you see the various ways in which this is done. When we look at what is available to us on the tribal set aside to achieve under COVID, because we have no cost extension, we have to modify the grant to spend it, and we're getting pushback to do that. I don't understand that. When you come up with a way to replenish, dealing with PPEs, dealing with a COVID response to victim service, doing the telecourt, telemed, even transporting with helicopters and you look across the Indian country, what that would look like, and knowing that we're didn't put that in as part of the cost, what are you going to do? You need a separate sheet that this group that we're speaking with today and yesterday need to come together and draw this up so straight up, I'm telling you, as a tribal leader, on a list of those things we had to do that were outside the parameters of the narrative under the solicitation of what could be done. I looked inside the law and I was checking out some of the things that could be done. And I began to notice that when we made the changes, and Katie, I'll never forget when you stood up and said that we will recapture that money back, and you did. And we really worked with the tribes to do the 2019 funding moving to where we are now. The fact that we could do that in a conversation with sovereigns affects change. Either grants assistance for prevention and prosecution of violence are authorized by an omnibus crime. I'm trying to think about that. I try to think about that because I know under TLOA and their TAP program, the tribal access program or action plan. I get confused with those two TAPs. Marcia, you can help me on that. That it provides services not only for the victim, but also for the perpetrator and the children. Then we got hit with something as called the Endangered Child Act. The state decided it was going to implement it. Any child that's endangered suddenly circumvented almost everybody's authority. And that child was protected. Now, I have no problem with protecting the child. That's not the issue. You have to have the honest conversation from sovereign to government that says, do not jump into tribal sovereign authority and use the children to do that. We're going to protect our children. We have ICWA. That diminished the relationship potentially of ICWA with our children with this Endangered Child Act in California. Be thoughtful of what the state does. There isn't a great conversation sometimes. And maybe that's the difference. Maybe that's the thing we're going to add to this as well, where we actually have our state partners being proactively involved with the tribes who get the state who gets federal money to do that. And they put that and design it where we have a tribal advisory board locally. State of California is big, but our corridor, our relatives, we go California, Arizona, New Mexico. And when we have it with our relatives and Pasquayaki, because we do what we do, you know. So when I look at this stuff, when I look at what needs to be done, I also know that enforcing these laws, and when I think about law enforcement and the fact that it hasn't implemented what we needed, we can't get law enforcement from the BIA, from Bureau of Indian Affairs, because we're in a 280 state. So why do we go to DOJ? Because you can provide it, which is why your definitions and your methodology of working with tribes need to improve, because the eye of Indian country is on you to help those measures of protecting our people under victims, Office of Victim of Crime, in a way that OVW is beginning to do, the way that COPS is doing, the way that when you look at the LVA program or LAV, when you look at the programs inside and how they're supposed to work with one another, we're so close to the edge of right. But again, we're off. When I look at the leadership and the no cost extension not provided, I don't think that was your intent. So why is it being treated so locked down? That's the way it's going to be. Katie, you have the power to change this. You and your team have the power to change this to the tribes. We're benefiting from the very thing we fought for once we came into this together. It's like somebody put up a wall that just doesn't exist. They're not supposed to be there anymore. And there it is. You know, and when you look at transferring the funds, now that we're under this COVID, getting the money to the tribes and the time that we had to spend it, there's this crazy vortex kind of thing happening. Like, if the tribe's going to put the money forward so that we can get reimbursed, or is the money, there's a mixed messiness here of having to make this fluid and streamlined. When you look at the needs assessment that's being done in order to achieve the other objectives when you're a year behind because of the way the funding came out, are they going to be penalized? They shouldn't be. Timelines that get changed carry with them responsibilities and flexibility, reasonable flexibility, because I know feds don't want to give up too much flexibility, that's for sure. But the fact that when I look at prosecuting remedies and what VAWA has done, and when I look at the survivor child uh, of a rape, when I look at these older laws, the Endangered Child Act, I looked at how abolishing Human Trafficking Act, and this stuff. When you look in the CJS bill, you have 513 million going towards that based on those old acts. You look at those old acts; they're no different in many ways than what they are attempting to do under OVC for tribes. It's like the reporting process is streamlined. We did this in other ways. Same with the application process through the Bureau. And in terms of trust responsibilities, we had to streamline it. This needs to be streamlined. And the state partners, when they shared with us, their response to OVC and ours was so extensive. It's like we're not bad guys and you're not bad guys. So we need to do this better. It's not a bad guy thing, not a bad thing. It just needs to be done better. And we have the ability to do it better, and we don't do it. That's the problem. When we know and we don't affect the change. Why is that? There is no reason for that. All of us are partners. Those who are into this grant process, we're ready. We'll work with you. We'll make that happen. We'll have the conversation, which is why the value of a tribal advisory board would have been fortuitous at this point. But we're okay. We've been there. This is a world we don't want to be in, but we have the experience in. Let us do it better. Let's make this happen. When I think of tribal leadership trying to respond to OEC, when it really is a gift to us that all our people are in it, that we have our folks who are doing this work, uh, we knew that the formula base would not meet the needs of smaller tribes, and that's a fearful thing, and our people are going to work with whatever they have, but we know we could do that differently. And I know the tribes who are large, who have large land bases, suffer greatly when they get hit with cyclone storms that poison all their water, when no access to bring in food, let alone dealing with COVID. This was before COVID. When you're looking at 100 miles or more to get from victim to victim, and when you have issues of tribal leadership not being supportive, that's why the women do this. That's why they come in with their gifts and stand their ground. You don't want to piss off the aunties because they will do this. And every tribal leader knows that. Every tribal leader knows that when they push the women too far, they will take care of business. That's our business. And it's not about the money, but now it is, because you gave us hope with this grant process. It gave us the possibilities to move beyond what we had, and it seems to be taken away. Because there's going to be many who are not going to succeed. And that's not based on what you and I have done. It's just that the language that's in there needs to be changed. When I look at the language too, right now, I look at the CGS bill, and it's scared because you change the language of transferring of funds from OVC to DOJ to DOI, even to other places without including us. That frightened me when I read that. That's a new appropriations bill, which means somebody inside the Fed system, because you don't also have a gathering, and Katie, you can do this as well. When you don't have your career people who all service tribes, don't meet and talk, how to best make this work, we're aware of the impact because our tribal people talk amongst each other, and let us do this more creatively, more thoughtfully, because you have people who are guided by you to advise you on what they do in their work under their department system. When I speak with OTJ, it's talking about the impact of all these things on the tribes with the Attorney General. When I look at the ENRD unit, Environmental Natural Resource Department, it's impacted because everything that is down at DOI can come towards them if they have to sign off on something working with a solicitor, because the Attorney General is the attorney for the president. So when we're sovereigns working with you and we have all these connections, let us do it together to make a difference where the money is there for them to use. The shift that has to occur, which they've done here in America in terms of COVID response, but they're not doing it with tribes. How we got put off to the side to not be taken care of, our people are being harmed greatly. When I think about the reporting process, it just sickens me to know that. But full-time advocates are needed right now because 43% increase in violent crimes. We also need to have wellness courts that help in this telecourt step, but we're limited because right now we're dealing with protection orders. We're doing with closing our reservations because people are encroaching, surviving with no subsistence because it got cut off, yet they open it up to do hunting on animals who are calving or birthing babies. That affects everything that is tribal. And our victims get harmed when they have no shelter, no food, no clothing, no place to go because they've been cut off from their family because of COVID. That's an whole nother set of victim services that's not built into this system. And I respect the fact that we're all boots on the ground with that right now. But let's be creative and do that tribal task force. I'll do everything I can to help. And I'll speak up and I'll stand up. You know who I am. I don't run away from what I say and do with you. But I will stand for everything that everyone is on this line is doing. Because we're going to do it without you. Don't want to, because we find it's to get the money to effectively make a difference. And you need to make that happen. And I want to follow up on Savannah's Act and the Not Invisible Act. It's going to happen anyway. When I look at the money that's inside the interior, the fact that they have money set aside uh, uh, for tribes in a 280 state that are doing tribal courts, after a 3-year study, you get to be considered for funding in tribal courts. We don't get it. If we don't have the system, we go to a traditional system. Banishment happens in my world. Partial, temporary, and permanent. We move our perpetrators away from us. They don't get to live in the village anymore. So it's not about prisons. It's about what we have to do and what you will accept and understand. I also need to ask for services that for victims who didn't get it, who didn't get the services, because on the approval of this needs assessment, tribes apply and they expect to have an extension because of this, and the turnaround time because you're also doing COVID response. In other words, you're outside, and I know they closed DOJ down for a little while because of COVID. When your people are away from here doing what we're doing, you understand how hard it is. So if we can't get what steps we have to achieve recognized, followed through to go to the next step and work out a reasonable spending process under this COVID window where tribes can expend their money knowing you're not giving them extra time, even though the time was taken away. I don't know who's stopping you, but I will find out. I will do everything I can to find out. If it's congressional, they will hear from us. The leadership is paying attention. Because, Katie, you've done a good job. And I don't think we need politics to play a role in this. Because what got set out to do was a good thing. And I think it needs to finish that way and continue. That means consider reducing the reporting time, the no-cost extension, as well as being able to modify it in a reasonable amount of time to spend the money. If that's the case, I worry about what needs to be done, and when I think about what our people are going through and what provisions they need and the relationships they have. Shelters are limited, they're getting full. Services are becoming harder to do, and coming to the res and closing our world off to the rest of the world. We're working harder now with other tribes on issues. We have so much to tell you, so much to say. If you think about what we do, I urge you with your leadership, Katie, I urge you to make certain, and Marcia, I am asking and encourage you to make certain that tribes get involved in the next go around dealing with missing and murdered, dealing with sexual assault, stalking, and trafficking, human and sexual, because that is really happening in our world. Not once, but twice, 2 sets of my nieces have been exposed to this. It didn't have to hit home to hurt me, because it was already hurting me from what I heard from all the other peoples. But when we hurt and you do nothing, how do we effect that change? How do we let a law strangle us in such a way our women become cattle on a freight train off to some other country? How do we stop not being able to take care of this when Department of Homeland Security is different at the port than it is at the border? How do we synchronize all the players? You've done the trilateral work. I've done that too. But I don't get to be a part of you, but we do it from our tribal side. That has to change. We are invisible to this world, so they harm us more. You saw that. You saw it happen. I grieve for these children who are in this state of placelessness now, who are being stalked by perpetrators, who casually go out to say hello and visit, do what they do, and they get taken. But I tell you, Indian country responded to our request. I reached out to our relatives across the states who weren't in a 280 state. And we did what we had to do. And we're still going to do that. I am not going to leave until we resolve this. It has to be resolved. And I've got these tribal people's back. I'm not going to change that position. But I will work with you. I consider it an honorable thing to be straightforward and work with one another. I stand my ground. You know this. I'm a good woman. I won't put you down. That's not my way. But I strongly feel the way I feel. And while I can still give breath to these words, I've given them to you now. Jonas, all my relations, I am finished.
Juana, as always, we just so much appreciate your words and the depth of the feeling that you give to us and the thoughts, the good thoughts that come from behind them. And we are taking these notes very carefully of what you've said, the issues that need to be looked at and the issues that need to be resolved. And we will definitely take that all into consideration.
Thank you, Marcia.
I'm hoping that you will also write maybe some written comments that we can consider as well. We'd be happy to see those.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I don't like to write.
But you're very good at it, so we'd love to see them.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right.
If we could put back up our slide of who we have listed for tribal leaders who had signed up to be able today to present testimony, and we'll see if any of them are on the call. Juana was our first one. We're not finding any of the tribal leaders when we look through kind of the records of who has been listed here as being able to speak or wanting to speak. What we'd like to do now is be able to make sure that if there are any of our tribal leaders that are on this list are present, if you could let us know so we can move you into a speaker role and be able to hear what you have to say. So we'll give a few minutes for that to occur. We've also had at least one additional person who's indicated, not a tribal leader, but a tribal citizen who wishes to speak. We'll recognize any tribal leaders from this list first to speak, and then if there are any other tribal leaders that are on the call. We have about 130 participants today, so we're hoping that there's some additional tribal leaders who may be on and willing to share their thoughts today. So of this list here, it doesn't appear that any of our other tribal leaders who had signed up to speak are on. We know there've been, especially in Alaska and in some of our other areas, have been so hard hit by COVID that there are a number of emergency council meetings that have been taking place, and we've heard from a number of tribal leaders that they're planning to submit written testimony, which is absolutely perfect, and we'll have instructions for you on how to do that at the end of the consultation today. So hearing from no other tribal leaders, we have another person who has indicated that they wish to speak today. And I believe we have that person already moved into a speaker role.
Hello, my name is Cheryl Bowie, and I am a member of the Kikik-Tegruk Inupiaq Corporation and NANA Regional Corporation, which is an ANCSA ANILCA organization under federal law. Anyhow, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My Eskimo name, my Inupiaq name is Anguyak, and my parents are, my mother's maiden name is Norton, her name is Rose Norton, and my father is Carl Bowie, and one is from the Arctic, and the other one has roots in the southern United States, and I'm currently living in Colorado. I would like the opportunity to speak on the chance of identifying opportunities outside of traditional avenues to increase our capacity in life sciences and forensic technology that could help us mitigate some of the issues that we're experiencing with the criminal stuff. I have almost every single male of my immediate family has died an unnatural death, and it's very painful for me on a regular basis. And so it is not without heart that some of these comments come, because some of them are critical. And I think that we need to be open to critical thinking and critical feedback in order to help us improve our services nationwide. Like I said, I'm from the Arctic, but I no longer live in Alaska. We don't really have a voice in Alaska anymore outside of the environmental and political groups. And unless you fall in line with what they want on a political level or want to be on Medicaid, you're not really included in anything. And I'm a former research fellow, and I also finished my degree at the University of Alaska Anchorage and at the Alaska Native Medical Center under Augusta Reimer in the Patient Education Department. And I also worked in the viral hepatitis program at the Alaska Native Medical Center when it was run by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention through Brian McMahon. And I'm a former research fellow for them also. I'm caring ambassadors, NVHR, CDC, AASLB, all we all worked kind of together starting back in 2014 and 15 after some of the hepatitis treatments came out. And I'm going to try and daisy chain some of this together. So in my review, what I noticed was a massive disconnect between what we're, at least in Alaska, capable of doing with forensic science on a medical level. And we have a number of labs, and South Central Foundation which has the only U.S. Public Health Service contract for some of the lab work that they do. They have been participating in molecular surveillance of our genetic data, along with a number of Alaska Native corporations that do not seek our consent. And so while we are struggling in this area to mitigate crime and public safety, and help advance some of our economic well-being, which leads to better health outcomes, we have this really robust medical system. And so my only urge is that we really need to try and marry up some of these efforts that we have that are more advanced. In some places, they may be different than others. And I think that we have a lot to offer if we can do this, but it has to meet its way to the private sector, to the public, where we live and work every day, and we don't all have access to the programs through Indian Health Service or the BIA. Like the other lady was saying, some of the changes that are happening right now are very specific to the Department of Justice and the State Department, especially in areas where they're making changes and requesting changes to the Controlled Substances Act and the schedule. And so I think this is an opportunity for us to advance science. Some of the work that has to be done through the harmonization and updating of some of our drug laws that are happening in the state requires creating standards, and organizations like NIST, the National Institute of Science and Technology, have been doing a lot of work in plant biotech. And I think that it will help. It just kind of fits with our tribal culture and some of the forensic science. Once you really kind of look at it, it's who we are. We are people who love the earth. We love metabolites. We love minerals. We love to measure and study things. I mean, these are the people that I represent, that I'm from. We're very smart and pretty quick on the uptake for a lot of things. And Alaska has the highest nutrient compound in their soil than any other place in North America. So I'm really here to try and kind of advance our level of being able to do research in this area, so we can help identify and create standards, at least participate in those processes, because along with that will come the money for funding for labs and for science and for public safety and for education. And it would match up to different efforts that are going on with the DEA, with the Department of Juvenile Justice, with other programs like 4-H, and some of the different things that people are trying to do. Because just in a few years, we're going to start pumping out a different type of scientist and doctor in the country than we've ever seen before, especially with the push of domestic manufacturing, which I believe is really going to kind of come out. And so I think it would really behoove the Department of Justice and our tribal organizations to start participating in some of the free webinars that they have through the FDA for regulatory science initiatives and the National Institute of Science and Technology. They have some amazing technical assistance that's going to be coming out of there. And I honestly would really recommend some people trying to work in the life sciences area in the labs to get and perform the lab work that has to be done for some of these new drug initiatives that are happening on the state level. Because when you do that, then you actually are getting paid to have a lab, and you can use it to help fund some of the public safety needs that we have currently. And the other part of it too is that we need to have uniformity of law. Some of some of our laws are really outdated, and with precision medicine and all of the new legalization efforts, it's going to pave the way for us. Because then at that point, I mean, when you do some of this advanced lab work in precision medicine and agricultural testing and monitoring of these different substances that are coming out, it just goes hand in hand with forensic science, and it's stuff that law enforcement depends on a regular basis. And this would do a lot to help us kind of mitigate some of the economic issues that we're dealing with in the more rural areas. It would also help supply funding to do upgrades for essential services like electricity and different infrastructure, because along with some of these labs and some of these programs, the first thing that happens is they have to upgrade to three-phase electric. And once you upgrade to three-phase electric, then you're that much closer to being able to deploy 5G technology. So when this all kind of comes in a pretty little package of legal drug distribution on a community level. And I think with the issues that we're experiencing with fentanyl and some of the international issues that we have with the different metabolites that are out there that get redesigned on a regular basis, I think it would be in our best interest to kind of do more homegrown talent, is where we can control and manage and mitigate the issues that may come up through that. And I personally love science. Where I'm from, there is not a lot of opportunity for people like me, and especially with a major disability. And this is a medical error, honestly. I was infected with 2 strains of hepatitis C from the Tribal Health Compact, and I got a icky part in my neck from a couple of places that depend on tribal compacts for medical devices. So I really think that it doesn't really matter who we are. If you're going to provide a service, if you're a tribal member or not, then you need to be accountable for it. You need to be participating in the community along with the other businesses. The GAO just came out with a report, GAO 2120. And I urge all of you to read it, because what it does in there is it discusses the differences that they have in oversight. And the only oversight system that was really built up through all of this was the construction. And so we don't really have a lot of oversight when it comes to some of this. And so I think with all of these efforts happening at the same time, I believe that it's a really great time to kind of step in and start trying to herd some of the cats in this game, because we're going to miss out if we don't. And it's a real big issue, especially with precision medicine. If we get left behind in this area, it's going to take decades to get caught up, and we're going to have people who are, have more advanced expertise and license to do what they want with our medical data and our biological material. And that can also be in a crime lab. So I think it's time that we need to revamp some of this and start participating in a more realistic and in a more realistic way with what's happening with the rest of the world. And where I'm from, in the Northwest Arctic, we don't have a lot of roads, and law enforcement needs roads in order to patrol and mitigate crime. And we need to look at our role in that. You know, we can't just starve our communities and our cultures under the name of preserving culture by killing us and keeping us away from grocery stores, law enforcement, roads. Being able to get away from an attacker is just as important in surviving one. You can't guarantee necessarily when you're going to be forced with a violent confrontation. But if you don't have the systems in place to fight it, then you are just a sitting duck. And that's not what I am. And that's why I live in Colorado. And so I think that we need to look at that. And I think that we need to become better at what we do. And we need to turn to some of the ANCSA and NILPA organizations in Alaska and get them to start putting up some of the money for crime determinants. So, and we have.
Thank you so much for your comments. We really appreciate your comments in this area. We'll ask you to just kind of wrap up a little bit. We have a 5-minute time limit for non-tribal leaders. So if you could give us some final remarks, we'd really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much for your time. If you want to contact me, you can. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your comments today. We'll make sure that your information is noted and we have your contact information. Thank you.
Okay.
Let's go back quickly to our list of tribal leaders. If there are any of our tribal leaders who have now dialed in who wish to offer their testimony, if you could just let Lauren, who is our host, know by commenting in the chat box that you wish to offer testimony, either tribal leaders who've actually signed up or tribal leaders who are here today who didn't sign up but wish to offer testimony. And then if you are not a tribal leader, but someone who does wish to provide testimony, we're available for that at this moment now because we do not have any other tribal leaders at this time. So just hit us up with the chat of testimony requested, and we'd be happy to do that for you. while we're waiting for that, the other way in which some folks have joined our call today is by phone. And so what we're going to do now for those specific sections is we're going to unmute I believe there's between 7 and 10 phone lines of people who've just called in via phone to see if any of them would like to present testimony. Obviously, they can't engage in the chat box, but we're going to unmute all those lines. And then if you wish to offer testimony, what you'll need to do is unmute your own phone as well, and then begin speaking. So Jamie, if you could lead us into that.
Thank you, Jamie, for arranging the open phone lines for us. Thank you, Lauren, for making that happen. Hearing no requests to testify via phone, I think we are drawing to a conclusion for today's event. We want to thank all of our participants over both days and remind you one more time that we do welcome written testimony, whether or not you gave oral testimony over these 2 days. There will be a final screen shown at the end of this meeting that reminds you where the written testimony is to be sent, and the deadline for submitting that testimony is December 10th. I'd like to welcome back Director Hart to make some closing remarks.
Thanks, Catherine. Thank you again for everyone being here today. A special thank you to Juana and Cheryl for sharing with us today. And I know there were many others on the phone and on the computer that were listening and agreed with your comments. And I hope many of you that weren't able to speak today will write some written comments for us to consider. I think, again, these are so helpful. And I know I was jotting notes the whole time. I'm sure Catherine and Marcia were as well. And we've all already been discussing some of the comments from yesterday. So please, again, share some of your written comments with us. We would love the more information, the better for us looking at next year's funding. And we are definitely already kind of talking about yesterday's, and we'll start talking about some of today's comments and trying to incorporate and really make the funding as good as it can be. And I think Juana had said it best, just keep on tweaking the formula. And we're going to continue doing that. And I hope you'll see that when we put out next year's solicitation and see some of the tweaks. I also want to thank Susan Freight from Saxman One, who ran our registration site. Also Jamie Bird, who you all saw yesterday and today from Tribal Tech, who was our on-screen facilitator, did a great job. And Lauren Smiley from Booz Allen Hamilton, who really made everything work smoothly behind the scenes. So thank all three of you for really making this consultation a success. And also thank Catherine Dark-Schmidt and Marcia Good for facilitating today. Again, thank you all for being here. It's just so great that we're still able to work together during these times. And I really appreciate the time that everyone gave today to be here. Thank you.
Kundawaha, thank you, Director Hart.
Juana gave us a lot of her time and energy over the past couple of days, and we are very appreciative of her openings on both days. And I hope that everyone who participated feels like we did move ahead with a good heart and an open heart for this discussion. Thank you, Director Hart, for closing us. Thank you to all of the participants who made themselves available today. Thank you to the speakers who opened their hearts and their words to us to talk about what is most important in the community. We are going to remind you one more time by putting up a screen that we are looking forward eagerly to any written testimony that anyone cares to provide. And Jamie, am I okay to close the event at this point?
Thank you, Catherine. And thank you for everyone participating. I think culturally, I'll go ahead and take a healthy risk and end our day, as we heard from quite a bit of different people for the consultation. Again, Sengit Samu, my name is Jamie. I'm from Okeawinge. One of the things we heard was aunties, and how aunties really help teach our young people, and are really there to again, bring that protection and making sure that we do things in a good way to honor our people. So I will be happy to share a song that I learned from my auntie as a kid from Okewinge, to close us out in a good way. So na vi uene we na tira acha hebwe buktin domu naku kayen tenanda kunde site ai hi o na vi uene we. So kuntawaha. And thank you for letting me be able to share that with you today. And I hope you go about your days in a good way, that you continue to bring the love and everything you need to your communities. And we just really appreciate you taking the time, because we know you're out in the trenches doing the work that you're doing for your communities to ensure safety, protection, and those are your relatives. And from one relative to another, kundawaha. And Catherine, you can now close today's consultation.
Jamie, we're honored to have had you share your auntie's song with us. Thank you so much for being willing to do that. All participants, this brings our consultation on the Tribal Victim Services Set Aside to a close. We will display, after the Zoom meeting ends, a slide for a few minutes so you can copy down any information you need about written testimony. Lauren, I think we are ready for that. And I wish you all a good and safe end to your week. Thank you.